They thought I was a broken old man with nothing left to fight for. They were wrong. Before I tell you how I reclaimed everything my wife spent a lifetime building for us, I need you to understand something. I almost let them win. I almost believed the story they were telling about me. My name is Leonard. I'm 67 years old, and I live in a small brick house on a quiet street in Hamilton, Ontario. My wife Bette and I bought this house in 1987, the year our youngest started kindergarten. We painted the front door red because Bette said red doors bring good luck. I Isminthal argued with her about things like that. She had a way of being right that made arguing feel like a waste of both our time. Bette passed away 14 months ago, on a Thursday morning in November. She had been sick for about 8 months, though she never complained the way you'd expect someone to complain when they know the end is coming. She organized, she made lists. She kept a small leather notebook on the nightstand and wrote in it almost every evening. I assumed she was writing letters to me, to the kids, to old friends. I didn't ask. It felt private, and Bette had always needed her private corners. We were married 41 years. I worked as a machinist at a plant in Stony Creek for most of that time, and Bette managed the household. That's how we said it back then. Manage the household. Which sounds like a small thing, until you realize what it actually means. It means paying the bills on time every month without fail. It means knowing which insurance company is gouging you and which one is worth keeping. It means doing the taxes, tracking the RRSP contributions, making sure the mortgage renews at the right rate. I handed over my paycheck and Bette handled the list. I trusted her completely. That trust turned out to be the most important thing I ever did. Our son, our older child, is 51 years old. He works in sales and lives 40 minutes away in Oakville. He's been married twice. The second wife, my daughter-in-law, is a woman who smiles at you while she's measuring your living room with her eyes. I noticed it the first time I met her, at a Christmas dinner maybe 8 years ago. I thought I was being uncharitable. I told myself to give her a chance. I spent the next 8 years giving her chances. Our daughter lives in Mississauga. She's 48 and works in HR, which I say not to explain her personality, but because it does explain something about the way she approached what happened after her mother died. Very procedural, very focused on what was technically correct rather than what was kind. The week after Betty's funeral, both of them came to the house. I expected that. I expected to sit at the kitchen table and cry together, maybe go through some of her things, share memories. That's what I expected. What I got was something else. My son came in and walked straight to the dining room, where Bette kept her good china. He started lifting pieces, turning them over, looking at the stamps on the bottom. I watched him for a moment before I said anything. My daughter-in-law went to the bookshelf in the living room and started pulling books out. Not reading them, just checking them, like she was doing inventory. I said, "What are you doing?" My son put down the plate he was holding and said, "Dad, we need to talk about the house." I told him we could talk about whatever he wanted, but I'd appreciate if he'd stop handling things that hadn't been offered to him. He didn't like that. He sat down. My daughter-in-law sat beside him. My daughter came in from the kitchen where she'd apparently been looking through the drawers, and she sat down too. And then the three of them looked at me like they were a panel and I was there to be evaluated. My son said the house was too big for one person. He said Hamilton had changed, that the neighborhood had value now that it didn't have 20 years ago. He said a man my age needed support and that there were very good retirement communities. He used that phrase, retirement communities, not nursing homes, because he's in sales and he knows which words land softer. He said my daughter-in-law had actually already made some calls. I sat there and I let him finish. Then I asked my daughter what she thought. She said she agreed. She said she'd been worried about me living alone. She said it wasn't safe. She said the house needed work, the roof, the furnace, and that those were costs nobody should be carrying alone at my age. I asked, whose name is in the title of this house? My son said that wasn't the point. I said it was very much the point. He said that eventually the house would come to them anyway, and that it made more sense, financially, logistically, to think about it now, while we could all make decisions together, rather than later when things might be more complicated. He said more complicated, and looked at me in a way that I think was supposed to remind me that I was old, and that old things become complicated. I told them I needed time to think. They said they understood. They said there was no rush. My daughter-in-law said she'd email me the information on those retirement communities. just so I could look them over. No pressure. She sent it before she'd even left the driveway. I watched from the front window. She was typing on her phone before she got to the car. That night I sat in the kitchen for a long time. Beth's chair was across from mine and I kept looking at it. 41 years of looking across a table at that woman, and now the chair was empty and my children were in a hurry to sell the table. I went to bed but I didn't sleep. At some point after 2 in the morning, I got up and went to Beth's side of the closet. I don't know exactly what I was looking for. I think I just wanted to be near her things. She had a shelf of shoeboxes up top, all labeled in handwriting: winter boots, summer sandals, the good heels she only wore to weddings. At the back of the shelf, there was a smaller box that wasn't labeled. I didn't recognize it. I brought it down and sat on the edge of the bed. Inside was the leather notebook from the nightstand, a folded piece of paper, a business card, and a small key. The key was brass-colored with a plastic orange head on it, the kind of key you get for a safety deposit box. I'd seen keys like it before, years ago, when my own father had one at the old Bank of Montreal on King Street. On the plastic head, someone had written in black pen the initials of the bank and the box number. "Bet," I said out loud. "What did you do?" The business card was from a law firm downtown, Prentice and Hollowell on James Street North. The name on the card was a woman named Janet Hollowell, with estate and trust law printed underneath. There was a handwritten note on the back of the card in Beth's writing: "Call after. She knows everything." I set the card down and opened the folded piece of paper. It was a letter. To me. In Beth's handwriting, which I would recognize anywhere. She wrote: "Leonard, if you're reading this, I'm already gone. And I'm sorry I couldn't say all of this to your face. You know me. You know I was never good at the hard conversations. I'm better on paper. I have been going to the bank every Friday afternoon for the past 32 years. I know you thought it was errands. You never asked, and I was grateful. What I was doing there is all in the box. Janet will explain the rest. All I want you to know before you reading else is this: I did it for you. Not for them. For you. You gave me everything, Leonard. I just wanted to make sure that at the end you had something left. Don't let them rush you. The house is yours. Everything is yours. Trust Janet." I sat on the edge of the bed until the sun came up. I called Janet Hollowell at 8 o'clock that morning, the moment the office opened. The receptionist said Miss Hollowell was expecting my call. That sentence hit me like a cold cloth on the back of the neck. Expecting my call. Beck had planned for this. She had arranged for a lawyer to be waiting for me before she was even gone. I drove downtown that afternoon. Janet Hollowell turned out to be a calm, precise woman in her late 50s who shook my hand and offered me tea and then sat across from me and said, "Your wife was one of the most organized clients I've had in 30 years of practice. I want you to know that what she built here is airtight." What Beth had built over 32 years of Friday afternoon visits to a bank was this. She had opened a high-interest savings account in her name alone in 1993, the year after my father passed away and left me a small inheritance, $12,000, that I told her to do whatever she thought was right with. She had put that money to work, quietly, carefully, carefully, carefully. She'd added to it over the years from the household budget she managed, small amounts that she tracked in that leather notebook with the same discipline she brought to everything. She had invested conservatively GICs, a balanced mutual fund through TD, some government bonds. She had let compound interest do what compound interest does when you leave it alone for 3 decades. The total, Janet told me, with current valuations, was just under $480,000. I had to ask her to repeat the number. She repeated it. Then Janet explained the second part. The house, which Bet and I had paid off in 2009, had been transferred quietly into a family trust in 2018, with me as the sole trustee and beneficiary during my lifetime. Bet had done this without telling me because, Janet said, Bet had been concerned about certain family dynamics and had wanted to make sure the house could not be pressured out of my hands without my full, unconditional consent. The transfer was legal, properly registered with the province, and completely binding. I was not the patriarch of some crumbling arrangement. I was the trustee of a house worth well over $800,000 in the current Hamilton market and the sole beneficiary of nearly $500,000 in savings, and I had a lawyer who already knew my name. I drove home. I sat in the kitchen. I looked at Beth's chair. Then I called my son. I told him I thought about what he'd said. I told him I'd also done some paperwork. I told him that before we had any further conversation about the house, I wanted both he and his wife and his sister to come over on Saturday because there were some things I needed to share with all of them at the same time. He sounded pleased. He said that was a great idea. He said he was glad I was being practical about this. Saturday morning, they arrived together. My daughter-in-law was already carrying a notepad. I noticed that too. I had printed several documents that Janet had emailed me. I had made copies. I set a copy in front of each of them when they sat down. My son looked at the pages and said, "What is this?" I told him it was the trust document for the house, along with a summary of my personal assets. My daughter picked up her copy. She read for about 30 seconds and then put it down and looked at me in a way I hadn't seen since she was a teenager, caught in something she couldn't explain. My daughter-in-law kept reading. She got to the second page. Something in her face went very still. I told them the house was not for sale. I told them that under the terms of the trust, it could not be sold, mortgaged, or transferred without my direct authorization, and that my direct authorization was not something they should expect to receive. I told them that I was 67 years old and in good health, and that I intended to live in this house for a very long time, and that if at any point I chose to leave, it would be on my own terms and my own timeline, and not because someone had sent me brochures from a retirement community before the rolls had even cleared from their mother's funeral. My son said, "Dad, we were just trying to." I said, "I know what you were trying to do." There was a long quiet. My daughter said she hadn't realized. She said she was sorry. I looked at her when she said it, and I thought she might actually mean it. I hope she does. I haven't decided yet. My son said that things had just gotten a little— he searched for the word complicated. I spent— yes, they have. That tends to happen when people move too fast. My daughter-in-law said nothing. She set her copy of the documents on the table very carefully, like she was setting down something heavier than paper, and she stared at the window. She did not apologize. I told them all that I loved them. I told them their mother had loved them. I told them that what their mother had done, she had done for me, but that it was also in a way a gift to them. Because if I had lost the house under pressure and spent the rest of my life resenting them for it, we would have all been worse off. This way, there was still a chance. I told them to go home. I said we'd talk again when everyone had had time to think. They left. I stood at the front window and watched the car pull out of the driveway. The red door caught the November light. I made tea. I sat in my chair. I looked at Beth's chair across the table, and for the first time since she'd gone, I didn't feel the emptiness of it. I felt something else, something steadier. She had sat in that chair for 41 years and managed things quietly and asked for nothing, and never once let me know how much she was actually holding. I opened the leather notebook. The entries went back to 1993. Every Friday, a date, an amount, a note. The handwriting was the same all the way through. Careful, unhurried, completely hers. The last entry was dated 6 weeks before she died. The amount was a routine transfer to the savings account. The note beside it said only, "He'd be all right." She was right. I am. I still think about that last entry in Beth's notebook. 6 weeks before she died, she transferred money into the account, wrote a small note beside it, and moved on with her day. No drama, no fanfare, just a woman who decided, 32 years earlier, that the person she loved most deserved to be protected, and then quietly did the work of protecting him, Friday after Friday, without ever asking for recognition. That's the part that stays with me. Not the money, not the trust document, not the look on my daughter-in-law's face when she turned to the second page. It's the consistency, the patience, the absolute refusal to cut corners or give up on something that mattered, even when nobody was watching. That's a kind of integrity I don't think I fully understood until I held that notebook in my hands at 2 in the morning and read 32 years of it, line by line. I've had time to think about my children too, and I won't pretend that part is simple. What they did came from somewhere, from fear maybe, or from a version of practicality that had lost its connection to decency somewhere along the way. I know they're not villains, but I also know that what they chose to do in those first days after their mother's funeral told me something real about the choices they'd been making for a long time before that. You can't treat a grieving father like a problem to be managed and then be surprised when he stops trusting you. Cause and effect doesn't care about intentions. It only cares about what you actually do. What I keep coming back to is this. The outcome of my situation wasn't luck. It wasn't accidental. It was the direct result of one woman's clear thinking and disciplined follow through over 3 decades. Beth saw a risk. She thought carefully about how to address it. She learned what she needed to learn: estate law, trust structures, savings vehicles I'd never heard of, and then she acted on that knowledge steadily and without complaint. She didn't panic. She didn't tell everyone about her plan. She just did the thing year after year because she decided it was worth doing. I think about that when I catch myself feeling sorry about getting older or worried about what comes next. There's a version of aging that's passive, waiting for things to happen to you, hoping for the best, assuming the people around you will do right by you simply because they should. Bet never lived that way. Even in the years when she was slowing down, when I could tell her energy wasn't what it had been, she kept going back to the bank. She kept making the entries in the notebook. She kept her word to herself. That kind of strength doesn't come from stubbornness. It comes from knowing what you value and refusing to let the hard days talk you out of it. I watched my wife live that way for 41 years, and I didn't fully see it until she was gone. I see it now. The red door is still red. I'm not going anywhere.